Oh,
Oh my.
and
Oh,
get used to that. Um, so thanks everyone for joining me for another Toad Learning Camp. Today we're going to talk about getting back to travel and giving back through travel. And first of all, we'll talk about getting back to travel. As most of you know, Bill and I just returned from our Celebrity Millennium Caribbean sailing a couple weeks ago. And we've got somebody on board right now on the Millennium and who I've been keeping in contact with to see how things have been changing. And so I would just wanted to go over what it's like to get back to travel and things to expect. And I did get a lengthy list of questions in advance, so I'll go through those as well. You can see, you can guess who that was from, Kevin. The biggest thing to remember is things are different, but different isn't necessarily bad. It sounds cumbersome at times with what the requirements are, and they are changing frequently. But the best advice that I have is just to be patient and wait until you absolutely need to know what you have to do, timing wise, what you need to schedule, and go from there, and be prepared for the most restrictions and the most restrictive amount of travel, and then be pleasantly surprised when it's not as restrictive. Just to give you an example, testing. There's so many different things. It depends where you're sailing from, where you're sailing to, where you're coming from, what your vaccination status is. There's a lot of different things with testing right now. There's PCR tests and antigen tests. Those are the most that they talk about. And for us to go to St. Martin for this last sailing, 3 weeks before our sailing, we were told we needed to have a PCR test 120 hours prior or an antigen test 48 hours prior, and no more than that, to get into St. Martin. And we needed a PCR test to get on the cruise 72 hours prior. So right there, you eliminate the 120 hours. You got to have it 72 hours prior. But it was prior to what? With the island, we had to have it prior to our last flight into St. Martin. For the cruise line, we had to have it 72 hours prior to arrival at the port. So you're calculating based on different things. And as it turned out, for the cruise line, they just wanted it 3 days prior. It didn't matter what time, but we didn't know that at the time. And within a couple of days, they took away that restriction or that requirement. And then 5 days before we had to cruise, they put it back on again. And the second time they put it on, well, the first time they put it on, it was because they were confused. They lumped together all the cruises, and that was the requirement for Greece at the time. And they pulled it out and said, okay, we're going to go with just what St. Martin requires. If you have a negative test to get into St. Martin, obviously you have a negative test to get on our ship and you're fine. But then May 30th, Barbados changed their requirements and our itinerary switched. And we were still going to the same ports, but we went in a different order because basically Barbados wanted us to be in a bubble, and they wanted us to have a PCR test 72 hours prior, and so that we were on board and they knew we came on board negative. And then the first stop was Barbados, and we were only allowed to do shore excursions through Barbados. I mean, through the cruise line. If any of you have been to Barbados, that whole port building that you walk through with all the shops wasn't even available to us. They brought the buses as close to the ship as we could. We were in the first berth and we could easily walk to the ship and didn't even go through that building at all. We didn't even have to go through a security checkpoint to show them our ID. But when we came into the port area, they had someone come on the bus and we just had to hold up our ID and they let us all in. So it was quite different than what we were expecting in the port. A lot of those restrictions have already changed. Barbados is now open and allowing people to do independent shore excursions. That happened on Tuesday. And or Monday night is when they were told, because the client on board sent me a message with each day they gave us a little printout and it said, okay, tomorrow you're going to be in Barbados. Healthy at sea, here's what you need to know, and here's the requirements for the
Yeah,
port.
do this,
So,
do that.
yeah, they told us exactly what the situation was in each protocol. When we went to Aruba, we were able to do our own touring. But they also did tell us, you know, when you're in the port building and you're getting off the ship, you must have your mask on until you get through the port building, and then we could take it off. But each country had different requirements as far as where we needed to wear it and where we didn't have to wear it. Like I mentioned, Barbados was very, they were very strict when we went there about what happened. We did a snorkeling excursion and we had to wear our masks on the boat. Now, I thought that was quite a bit of overkill, but we did it because those were the rules in that country. And that's something that I wish would have been made a lot clearer to everybody on the ship, because there was a lot of people that didn't follow the rules. And like, you are going to ruin it for the future guests that are coming here, and they're not going to want us to come here because we can't follow the rules. Even though I didn't agree with them, but you know, but they did tell us we could take them off when we went snorkeling. So that was a plus.
I was going to put mine on the top of the snorkel and just wear it the whole time.
But then I noticed also when we got back on the boat after snorkeling, even more people didn't put their mask back on. And some people didn't have them on in the bus when we were on our way back to the port. And, but they made sure when the port security officers came in, they put on the mask so they wouldn't.
Yep. Okay.
So when we did our private excursion, or when we did the celebrity excursions in Aruba and Curacao, when we were in the buses, we were required to wear masks. But when we are outside, we were required to socially distance, but not wear masks. So that worked out pretty well. I did hear from other people that if they did private things, it kind of varied. It depended on who was operating the tour and what exactly they were doing. Someone had an open air bus, and so they allowed them to go without masks. Someone took a taxi, and they agreed between the driver and the passengers that they didn't have to wear masks, but the next time she took a taxi, they did. So it was kind of on a case-by-case basis. The one thing that was kind of odd for me on the ship itself, because everything, we felt like we were truly in a bubble. We felt like everything was safe no matter what we were doing. We did have the option to wear masks, but they weren't required at all. And you could see people walking in on embarkation day, and they asked us to take down our masks so they could verify our picture when we checked onto the ship. And then they're like, you don't have to put that on if you don't want to. and it took a while. People would walk in a little bit further. Some would leave them on a little longer. But by the time we got to our rooms, and even by the elevator, people were taking them off, and they were really excited about being able to do that. And we did feel very safe on board.
We really didn't see anyone. Once we got on board and we're doing like, we're cruising, we didn't see anyone who was wearing a mask other than the crew.
Yeah. And that was the one thing I was going to say, is it was really kind of we were a little uneasy, but not to the point of affecting our vacation, with all of the crew wearing masks. It was kind of like, what do you know that we don't know? Or why are you wearing it, but we don't have to? And are you really safe? And so it kind of led to some questioning. Now, this week they've started taking off the masks. And what I have determined is that it's not just about our comfort level going in there and whether or not we want to take off our masks, but it's also their comfort level with us and their level of wanting to make sure we feel comfortable. So we noticed a lot of things, little things that would change over the course of the cruise based on how we were responding.
Yeah.
When we came in, they had a lot of discs on the ground that said socially distance, give people space and try to stand 6 feet apart, and in the buffet, by the bars, just
In
about
the elevator.
everywhere you went, there were circles. And um, within 2 days, 3 days, they were all
Two,
gone.
three, yeah.
Yeah, they
And it-
started removing a few each day. And just to kind of keep the reminders there. And this week, the only thing left are the reminders in the elevators. And in the elevators, it just says, just give people their space, and that's fine. They're still operating about 30%. 25 to 30%. Their goals are 40%. They weren't the initial cruises, they weren't going to sell more than 40%, but they only had about 30%. And this also was something that I didn't, at first, I wasn't really sure if I liked it. In the end, it was okay, but they sold the whole ship and their limit was 40%. But that didn't mean that they sold every category equally up to 40%. They sold the suites at 100%.
Okay.
So when we went to Lumine for dinner, we had to wait to get in.
Wow.
But if we went to the Metropolitan for dinner, we could pretty much walk in there without a wait at all. So that was a little weird. We went to Cuisine for La Petite Chef, and we were there the first night, and I think there was 5 tables.
Yeah, 4 or 5.
The second time we went there was 4 tables in the whole restaurant. So there was absolutely no waiting to get in there. There was no problem that we didn't schedule it in advance.
Well, we had to wait for that one.
Yeah. So, yeah, so it was, we were also worried it was going to feel eerie being so few passengers on board, but it really wasn't. And the first night we actually bypassed going to the Martini Bar because there were so many people at the Martini Bar, and we decided to go to the Sunset Bar instead, or Rendezvous or something. And they still held all the activities that they normally would. Now, I
Yep.
did hear on the futures, or on the subsequent sailings, that they did change the theater to only 1 show a night instead of 2, and they got rid of the bingo, but I haven't confirmed that for this week. But some people were upset about them changing to 1 show, but if they would have been there with 2 shows, they'd understand why they changed it to 1 show. People were so spread out. It was probably really hard for the performers. And we went and saw a comedian there, and he made a comment a couple of times about the 47 people in the audience. And
There were tumbleweeds going up and down the aisles.
we were up in the balcony, and I mean, you could see there was nobody there. And so it was a little bit of a struggle for him to do his set.
Especially with the hecklers in the front row.
So, yeah, so that was a change. Now, I was asked, how long are they going to be reduced? The goal at least for Celebrity and Royal Caribbean, is that they get up to 100% by next year. They're going to start increasing it but like I said, the limits were 40% on the first sailing, and they didn't even reach that on the first 3 sailings. They're also gonna see what happens with the guidelines from the CDC and that sort of thing. Now, while the sailing we were on was not bound by anything the CDC said, they wanted to try to do as close to what the CDC was recommending as they could, just to be able to show that we can do this in the United States as well. I know that the Freedom sailing that went out, the test sailing last weekend, now, they weren't all vaccinated. The CDC was on board that sailing to see how things went. And I think that is a great thing, because I think some of the people in the CDC have absolutely no idea
No clue, yeah.
what a cruise is like. And I mean, that's clear with some of their restrictions, because it's obviously more deadly to be on a cruise than it is to go to the Gaza Strip, but though things are changing. I think they've increased the level of warning for Israel, and they've decreased it for cruising, which is also amazing. They still don't recommend you go, especially if you're not vaccinated, but it's only a level 3, not a level 4 now for cruises. But yeah, we don't really know exactly when they're going to start increasing and by how much, but they're going to judge it based on how everything goes, and things are going to change on a frequent basis. We were on the Cruise Critic board before our cruise and during our cruise, and people who were cruising later than us said, so what do I have to do for my testing? And I'm like, you should wait until you get direction from Celebrity to figure out what you should do. What we did, because people said, do we have to have a printed out copy of something? Well, we found out that the next sailing after us required a QR code, and we didn't. So things even changed in a week. And so I think it's important just to be prepared to check the guidelines right up until you're going. And for us, we didn't know this at the time, but St. Martin changed the requirements the day we got on the ship. And so initially we were told that we would need a antigen test to get back to the United States. And so anybody going back to the United States that needed an antigen test would get one. But we had very few people from other countries on our ship. But some people were staying in St. Martin longer, so they couldn't get it on the ship because it wouldn't be valid anymore. What we found out the day we got on the ship is that St. Martin required an antigen test for us to get back off the cruise. So we all of a sudden had to change everything, and everybody had to get an antigen test instead of just those who needed one to get back where they were going. Which the reason it didn't affect us is because we were going to get one on the ship regardless. But that made it a little bit more challenging for the crew. Though they did an incredible job with it, especially when we had the 2 positive tests on board. They immediately isolated them down by the medical and kept them there the remainder of the cruise. And because they did test them again, and they did test positive again. And then it's disputed. I've heard 2 different reports. I heard that Celebrity flew them home on a private medical chartered flight. And I've also heard that they stayed in St. Martin and were isolated or quarantined in St. Martin until they tested negative and went home. I'm not sure which one it was, but it was dealt with there. Anybody who was a close contact with them were given a PCR test on board and were quarantined in their cabins until the PCR test came back for everybody who was noted as a close contact. Basically anybody who was on a shore excursion with them, their cabin stewards, their dining team, anyone like that that were identified. We did also talk to the guest services manager, and he said that they have some sensors on board so that they can tell if people are running a fever. And so they could narrow down who might need to have some further medical attention. Because there's so many things that I didn't think about before going on there. It's like, they're going to make sure, we got to keep track of who we go in contact with, and they're going to track us somehow. Well, some countries don't allow that. And so that was a challenge for them, trying to figure that out. And initially we were told that we would have a wearable, they called it a tracelet. And that ended up not happening because of the limitations of the device. It just wasn't ready the way that they needed it to be ready. It wasn't waterproof. The battery only lasted 3 months. And so it wasn't going to be ideal. If you took it off and then went somewhere else, well, you're not being traced anymore. So it was interesting, definitely, to see how they were handling everything. And I thought they did a really good job. Distancing at the shows and dining, that was another thing that's interesting, because I've been reading up on what's happening on the Adventure of the Seas, and also well, no, not on Freedom, but I think just Adventure of the Seas. They're doing things totally different. Even though they're the same parent company, there's a lot of differences there. In the theater, for example, every other row is blocked off. That wasn't that way on ours. Now, they did have 1,000 people on board, which is about 1/3 of the passengers, and we had just under 600 on board. So that could have had some play in what they decided. They possibly had more children on board than we did. So then you have more that are unvaccinated. We only had 8 children on board. So, and I think,
Tracy,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, do you know how long the Freedom of the Seas test cruise was?
it was 2 nights,
2 nights, thank you.
that's 2 nights, 3 days. That's the minimum
Okay.
that was required.
Okay,
And honestly, I don't even understand these test cruises. And
I know,
they had to have 10% of guests on board,
okay.
which 10% really isn't much at all.
Mm-mm.
You're talking a couple hundred people. And the first sailing was all Royal Caribbean employees. The Disney sailing that's going out next week is going to be all Disney employees. Yeah, what I understand is that they're supposed to simulate a positive test, and what they would do as well. So it's not these test cruises that a lot of people were really gung-ho about. Oh, I want to get on a free cruise.
Yeah.
They weren't going to be all fun and games, or all cruising fun. And
Yeah.
certain people were going to be tagged as you're the positive case. Whether or not you really were positive, you were going to be treated as a positive case, and they were going to go through their simulation of what would happen. And so that the CDC could see how it's responded to. So, and that was, I mean, from that respect, it was kind of interesting having a positive case, having 2 positive cases on our sailing, because a guy 5 doors down from us was labeled as close contact. And they put a yellow magnet on their door, both inside and out, to signify that they were under quarantine. And they were not allowed to meet face to face with anybody at that until they got a clearance. So they got room service delivered out in the hall, and then they went and got it when the personnel had cleared the area. it was kind of weird because we were going back to our room when the medical personnel got there, and they're all in full PPE and face shields and everything, standing at their door to take their test. And they went from room to room to all the close contacts and tested them all. And but yeah, they made it pleasant for the people who were under quarantine. And I assume they did the same for the people who were isolated, especially because they were asymptomatic.
What was it? Free streaming?
Yeah, they gave them free streaming, free video on demand, bottle of champagne, some chocolates, and anything they wanted from any of the restaurants.
Tracy, how long did that PCR test take to come back?
15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, the PCR test.
No, the PCR, was it like the next day?
Oh, they had it.
Next day.
Most of them had it that night.
Okay,
But it was the next morning for the rest of
so
them.
yeah,
So they were quarantined when they got back on the ship from the day, because that's when we were all on shore when they found out that they tested positive.
Mm.
And so everybody, when they came back to the ship, they were immediately notified that they needed to quarantine. And they sent the medical personnel up there that evening, and by morning, everybody was cleared. So yeah, they said it would have been quicker, except they were in the middle of doing all the other tests too.
Yeah.
And because it was the testing time for the whole entire ship.
right.
And then on top of it, I think they were a little concerned that when they told us that there were two positives, that people would want to be tested immediately. So they opened up the appointments for walk-ins until midnight that night.
Wow,
And so they were extremely busy with
busy.
that. And they were supposed to have appointments until like 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock on Friday night. And they
Yeah.
finished them up by 1 o'clock. So at 10 o'clock in the morning, they said, we only have about 75 people left to do. If you guys want to come in early, please try to come in the next 2 hours.
I think that was a nice way of saying, get your ass up here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the buffet was all served by the crew. They did it in a way so that it actually didn't feel like it was a problem or it didn't bother us at all. It actually made it feel a little bit more special and more luxurious because they were taking care of it for us. And it kind of reminded me when we were on the Azamara cruise and we were going through the line outside at the grill, and we would just tell them what we wanted and then they'd hand us our plate at the end. And it was very similar to that. And so that was fine. And the question or the comment was made, just thinking about how crazy breakfast sometimes is on a port day. We never saw any craziness anywhere. We went up to the buffet at prime times and it looked like you were there on off hours. If you got there really early or you got there way at the end of dinner time, that's what it looked like all the time. We went for tea one afternoon just to get the treats, and we were the only table in the whole buffet. Other than people that I didn't realize that I knew. So
Mhm.
that was Gio was there from Good Morning America. The next morning I realized that's who it was. They had just gotten done filming their video segment. Thanks, Tammy. It was good seeing you, or seeing your name. And the gym is being handled similar to how the casino is being handled. They are not allowing people to be on equipment or machines that are right next to each other. So they've just disabled every other machine in the casino, and they've put a sign, give me some space, on the machines in the gym. Um, that's really the only changes there. That bothered me a little bit in the casino because I mean, I don't go to the casino all that much, but if I go, we might want to sit next to each other and play on machines next to each other. Or if I want to go and play a certain machine, some of them were shut down.
Mm.
So, because it's not like I'm going to play any old game. I wanted to play one that was more fun, and the ones I went in weren't. So, but we
They give you
did,
$50.
right? We did the drinks and more package. So we got $50 each to spend in the casino, and we won $159 with a frog game. We found
There you go.
found a wildlife game and we played it, and on the second spin I won. I wasn't paying attention. You could change the denomination, and I was playing nickels instead of pennies. I was talking on the phone with my sister, and the second one I'm like, oh my God. She's like, cash out.
I lost most of mine.
Hey,
I had Tracy play the last $20.
Mm-hmm. Kathy?
Going back to the buffet, were the places where you can get coffee yourself, the soda machines, were they open and accessible, or was it a similar setup, somebody there to serve you?
They were accessible. You could serve yourself. Servers did go and get it too. It was interesting when we got some coffee when we were in the buffet, and someone was over at the coffee machine, and the server stood way back until he was done getting his coffee, and then she approached the machine. So they were definitely giving people the space. Not all of the guests were, and honestly, it didn't really bother us. I never felt uncomfortable or crowded or anything like that. And people weren't right on top of you, but they also weren't giving you 6 feet.
And if I could move to a state where everyone was vaccinated, I might feel like that.
Mhm. I haven't heard about needing reservations to sit at a bar. Kevin, where did you see that?
So it was either one of the Royal blogs or Cruise Critic or something. I can't remember where. I know
Okay.
something that had come up, and I don't know if it was proven that that actually happened or if it was just something that somebody thought they heard, they saw, they read, and reported it as news.
We didn't experience anything like that. And in fact, in like the Martini bar, you could never find a chair there.
Tracy, how about the pool?
The pool,
Pool.
there was nobody out there.
Okay, no, I'm just,
And
I think-
they had the chairs spaced out so that they were clusters of 2. So instead of having a big row of chairs,
right.
they did have them spaced out.
I think, guess it's for the staycation, the Disney staycation ones, because they put out a thing about the update to the app where you can reserve your pool time. And people are all up in arms about that, of course, but that was the only place I read about it, was on the Disney.
Okay.
PPL.
And the thing with that is they're gonna have a lot more kids on board too, and kids
Right.
can't be vaccinated under 12. Well, in the UK, I don't even know if they're down to 12 years old yet.
Yeah.
So that's gonna make a big
Tracy?
difference.
I think that I got a notice today from Kroger saying if you're 12 and under, or you're 12 and over, if anybody in your family's 12 and over, you can get vaccinated.
From the
Maybe it's come
UK or from,
Oh no, from Kroger here.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know here that's in any sailings from the United States that are not in Florida, if you're 12 and older, you are required as of August 1st to be vaccinated. Florida's a different story, and I'll get into that because that's really different. Trivia too, they didn't, I mean, it wasn't restricted how many people could go into the lounges or anything like that. They had a magician in the Sky Lounge one afternoon, and it was packed in there. And I think they probably did that just for better experience for both the magician and the people. Because you put them in the theater and it felt empty anytime there was anything going on in the theater. And masks, like I said, we didn't have to wear them on the ship. That is going to change with the sailings going from Florida. So this might be a good time for me to switch gears and talk about the restrictions from Florida, because we're just starting to hear a lot of them right now. I expect to hear Disney's after the test sailing. So early July, we expect to hear Disney's requirements for the US, but we've got MSCs came out today. Celebrities and royals are out. I think some of the others as well. As you all know, the governor of Florida has banned any companies from requiring proof of a vaccination in order to use their services. So what they have decided to do is there are two different classifications of people. You're vaccinated or you're considered unvaccinated. If you do not want to provide proof of vaccination, you are handled as unvaccinated. With MSC, they have another category of recovered within 90 days. So if you can provide proof that you had COVID and you have a doctor's clearance that you are able to return to work, school, or go on vacation, then that's okay for that. If you are unvaccinated, you will have extra costs and a lot more restrictions on any of the cruise lines that you go on when cruising out of Florida. You will have to have a negative PCR test 72 hours before you get to the terminal at your own expense. When you get to the terminal, you will have another antigen test at the terminal, and you will have at least one more on the cruise, possibly two, and all of those will be charged to you. I want to say that Royal has two, one at the end of the cruise and one at the beginning of the cruise in the port, and it's $134. Celebrities is three, one in the middle of the cruise as well, and that one's $178 a person. They will have areas in the dining room and the theater for unvaccinated people to sit. They will, you will not be allowed to go in some venues if you're unvaccinated. And if you're in an area where there are unvaccinated people indoors, masks will be required for everyone vaccinated and not. If you're in an area that unvaccinated people are not allowed to be in, masks will not be required. From the sound of it, though I haven't seen anything specific on this, it sounds like a lot of the venues unvaccinated people will not be allowed to go to, and a lot of the events. There will be some countries that will not permit unvaccinated people to get off the ship, and you won't be able to. And
That's kind of weird.
well, you know, it's the laws of the countries that you're going to.
Yeah, but you have a ship full of people, and if somebody's not vaccinated, they're on board, they could become
But
symptomatic.
anytime that you're mingling with unvaccinated people, that our masks are required. So, and the chances of someone who is vaccinated getting an infection is lower. So that's why those are the rules.
That's an acceptable risk.
Honestly, I feel that this is the only way that they can do it.
Yeah,
They don't want unvaccinated people to be on the ships, is my take. And so it's not going to be the same cruise experience at all for you if you're not vaccinated. I don't know how long these restrictions are going to be in place. My guess is at least until November 1st, when the conditional sale order expires. Though the conditional sale order doesn't apply in Florida. Kind of.
Yeah.
It's still
I
up in
know.
the air exactly what's going on with that. So, but that's kind of the way it is. They want to make sure that people who are vaccinated are still going to have just as good of an experience on the cruise, because they know that you've taken the steps to make sure that everybody else around you is safe as well as yourself.
You don't have to have the PCR test if you're vaccinated
Correct.
beforehand, right? Okay.
Correct. And that's where, I don't know, I struggle with that a little bit. It being vaccinated, I'm happy for that. But seeing that 2 people on our cruise tested positive
And
and
they were vaccinated.
and we do know of another couple who tested before the cruise and was positive. And so they ended up canceling the cruise. So, I mean, obviously there's also the situation of people forging cards or buying black market cards, and hopefully they'll find a way to eliminate that. And so for that reason, I don't mind the testing beforehand, because everybody getting on board is clear. Some of them are still going to be testing at the ports for, it just depends on which cruise line it is and what the situation is, how many people are vaccinated versus not vaccinated on board. And so it's as clear as mud, and it will be changing a lot.
And there's no restrictions on where you get tested like there is in Hawaii?
Not really. You just have to make sure it's the type of
Right.
test is the right type of test.
Right, exactly. But Hawaii is crazy. I mean, I looked at their list and there's nowhere near me that I can get tested. The only thing I could do is send away for one of the tested homes. Thank God I'm not going until next October, but
Which the interesting thing about that is, for St. Martin, the at-home tests were not good enough.
acceptable, right?
Yeah, we could not get an at-home test.
Yeah, I think that's kind of weird. But
Then I also wonder, because the way that we had to do our tests, we went to Walgreens for both our PCR and our antigen test. And they give you the swabs and you do the swabbing.
Oh,
We
okay.
had to go through the drive-through. In one case for the PCR test, the swab was still in the packaging and we had to open up the packaging. In the other, and the antigen one, because they gave us also a vial, and we had to put the swab in the vial and break it off and cover it up and send it back in to them. For the antigen test, he opened up the end of it so we could just pull it out easily, and we just swabbed it and put it back into the same container. But we did our own both times, and I'm
Okay.
like, how do you know that you're going in far enough, and
Yeah.
all that sort of thing? And they kind of keep an eye on you, and they tell you how far you're supposed to go in. And but it just made me wonder if you did come back negative and you were really positive, could it
Yeah.
didn't go far enough back? I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but an at-home test was not good enough.
Yeah.
But that was basically an at-home test in a drive-through.
Yeah.
But I suppose they can verify that it was me taking the test, because I did have to provide an ID to get the test. And so I guess that makes it less of an at-home test, but it was an at-home test that they gave us, because they told us what test they were giving us, and it was one of the at-home ones. So, but So let's see, the next question that I have here is on Coco Cay, are they really doing one ship at a time? I'm not sure how long that will be the case. There's only one ship sailing right now, so until the Freedom starts sailing on regular sailings, it will be one at a time. But I imagine same with all the other capacities that they're going to ramp it up as things improve. With the room stewards, I wouldn't say that they're more standoffish now. They are encouraging people to not handshake and not hug and that sort of thing, but we did see fist bumps and elbow bumps and all that sort of thing. Other than in the suites, they are not permitted to come in your cabin when you're in the cabin. The same with room service right now. When room service comes, they'll knock on the door and then you'll take the tray from the cart and bring it in yourself. In the suites, it's different because we had the they're not calling it a butler anymore. It's a personal retreat host. And so she brought, when we ordered room service, she actually brought the room service into us rather than the room service team. And our room steward did come in once
Yeah.
or twice when we were there. Mostly it was our personal retreat host that would come in if we were in the room. But yeah, they're not permitted to do that. And the virtual muster drill, I haven't heard of the other ones doing it. All of the Royal brands are doing it, and it's actually pretty nice. So as a result, none of the facilities close for that half an hour time when everybody's forced to go into rooms and watch them put on a life jacket that we've seen a million times. You go into your cabin and on your TV is instructions on going through the training, and there's some videos to watch there, or you can do it on your app on your phone. And then it tells you the very last step is you go to your muster station at any time between certain hours. And then you go to your muster station and they give you a sticker. They check you in and they give you a sticker on your card. So your card shows that you have gone through the muster drill. They keep the records of everyone who's been there, and they remind people throughout the afternoon if you haven't done it. It was really slick, really easy to do.
And you do tap your cards, so everyone is registered.
Yeah. Now the one that's really all that I have. Anybody have any questions about getting back to travel?
Can't wait.
In 35 days, we'll be heading off to Greece. So
Yay.
I'll
Still
be-
Israel?
it's still on the schedule. We are the first ship that is supposed to go to Israel. We'll
Okay.
see if it happens. I looked on a port map to see how close the ports were to the Gaza Strip, and one is awfully close.
Oh.
Jerusalem, the
Maybe we can
protocol
skip
that
that
we
one.
go to get to Jerusalem is really pretty close
Close.
to the Gaza Strip.
So
So
kind of within missile distance.
yeah, probably. So
What ship will you be on, Tracy? Is that the
the Apex.
Apex?
Mhm.
And is it the Greek captain? Do you know?
I am not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it is.
He was so cool on the edge. He was just very, like, he interacted a lot and he was just kind of cool. And I think it'd be really
Okay.
neat. Half titties or something like that.
Okay.
And I
Uh-oh.
think it just would be cool, a Greek captain going to
Mhm.
Greece,
You just sent Tracy off on a,
Well, no, because our captain, wasn't he Greek too?
yeah.
Yeah.
Probably
it's-
was, because you went right before you went around the same time I did, right? On the edge? Not
No,
like in
no, I'm
February?
Oh,
talking
no,
about
we're
when-
talking,
Oh, on
the
this ship.
Millennium. On the
Oh,
Millennium.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a really funny guy, really nice guy. Like the first day, he's giving his morning report and he says, I'm going to give you an update on the location. You're in the ocean. You don't want anything more than that. That's all you care about. You're on a cruise ship. Well, who cares where you're at? And then he goes into detail with it. He was funny
Yeah.
every single time he came
Cool.
on board.
That's
And he
neat.
was very personable, and
Yeah,
you'd see him on the ship and he wasn't like, I'm the captain. It was
Oh,
more,
yeah.
hey,
Mhm.
how you doing?
Yeah,
yeah.
cool, that's neat. I like
And then
that.
there was a dispute on Cruise Critic about the testing at the port, because they told us on Monday, no, they told us on Tuesday we needed the 72-hour test, but a lot of people had already gotten the 120-hour,
Mm,
and they couldn't verify that everyone got the notice. So because it was such a short notice, anybody who didn't have the right timing, they gave them a PCR or an antigen test at the port, and they didn't charge them. And so people were on Cruise Critics saying, you don't have to worry about the 72-hour one. If you don't have it timely, it'll be free at the port. And I said, don't tell people that, because it's probably going to change. That was for us. And some guy said he talked to guest services and they said, no, it's free. And I said, I find a lot of times they don't understand you're talking about other sailings, not this one.
mhm.
So he suggested I go talk to someone else, and I went into the concierge lounge to ask concierge, and she wasn't there, but the captain was. So I asked him. And he's like, thank you for clearing that up. He was like, no, this is not going to be free to anyone except for children after this sailing. So,
All 8 of them.
yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Well, I mean, it's a big difference if you've got half of
Oh,
the
yeah.
people don't come with the test because they think they're going to get a free test there, and you're talking 300 people need a test. That's
Yeah.
not going to be very efficient at the port. So, but does anybody have any other questions about getting back to travel? If
When you
not,
were
then
on board, other than the muster drill, did you have to tap in or out of venues or any place you were?
nothing at all. Yeah, it felt like just a regular normal cruise.
Except less people.
Yeah, it was just so comfortable. So,
Yeah,
Are you
I
seeing a lot of bookings, Tracy?
I'm sorry.
Are you seeing a lot of bookings for cruises?
It's interesting. A couple months ago, things started to pick up. And last month was really good too. This month started out, now this month has been okay. It seems like we're starting to go the other direction now with some of the cruise lines. And I think it's because of all the recent cancellations. I think people are really wondering when things are going to get back. I'm not seeing a slowdown with Royal Caribbean and Celebrity. Those ones are still booking at a good rate. And I think it's because they are sailing and people can see what it's like and make a judgment. This week was Disney's fall 2022 release, and you wouldn't know it. We had our lowest release week ever.
wow.
Mhm.
It's
For Disney.
for Disney.
For
It's
Disney, yeah.
very,
Well, I see people posting and, they're already saying, I'm finally gonna ask for my refund because they've canceled me 4 times. And, I think
Yeah.
you're right. I think that's the reason.
and I think 2 weeks ago, they canceled out to November 4th on the Magic and
Mhm.
canceled through mid-September on the Wonder. Well, they're probably going to redeploy those ships to something else, but they couldn't get on those itineraries for the shortened amount of time that was left over.
Mhm.
But people don't necessarily know that. And it makes you say, we're canceling till November. It's scary. It makes you
Yeah.
wonder if it's ever going to end. To date, NCL canceled 5 ships, some through November and some through January. And it's not necessarily that they feel the need to cancel them because of the pandemic,
Mhm.
but they're not filling them. And so they're not going to operate them at next to nothing. And there is a point when it's not profitable for them to operate it. And I think that's what happened with our Vision of the Sea sailing. They just weren't selling them with all the restrictions in Bermuda. And it was just really hard to get people to sign up for it. And so knowing that they were going to be able to start the test cruises and get the Freedom back in the beginning of July, it didn't make sense to keep those sailings. They want to get back to sailing, but they also have to start, at least breaking even at some point.
Yeah,
So, some of them will be a loss for sure, but they can't have a sizable loss week after week. So I think that's why we're seeing more cancellations, but the cruise lines with a lot more cruise ships, they can cancel 4 or 5 ships and nobody's really going to notice. When you have a cruise line with 4 cruise ships and they cancel 2 of the ships, that's half of their sailings are gone.
mhm.
So I think it just gives people a different impression.
The other question was the Millennium sailing with a full crew or?
I think it was a little bit reduced, but not much. They said we had about 800 crew members on board. So we were about 1.3 crew to each person.
Wow.
Really, really nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we had those in our area. We had 2 stateroom attendants and our personal butler. So between the 2 of us, we had our 3 crew members.
Well, and they've also said that they're, sometimes the crew are actually on the indoor or not. They've got customer staterooms
Right.
instead of their normal ones.
Yeah,
Just to keep
the crew are still, they're not sharing cabins. So, and that's part of the reason too, with the reduced staterooms, they do have crew in guest cabins right now in certain areas, but they're not in the areas with the other guests.
so
So,
Tracy, also the cruise lines that will sail out of other states, like Celebrity, they'll still require vaccinations.
everyone 12 and over after August 1st, nearly everyone cruising outside of Florida
Florida,
will
okay.
require vaccines.
Anybody sailing out of Bayonne soon?
I haven't
Not yet.
heard soon, but
Not soon, but they will be
yeah,
eventually.
they will
Yeah.
be. Norwegian has not canceled their sailings out of Manhattan yet.
Manhattan.
And we haven't had any cancellations with Royal and Celebrity later this year out of Bayonne. I'm not sure how late they were sailing out of there, but
Mhm.
they're still. I'm guessing that Royal will need to do the test cruises because they're not going to make the 95%.
Right.
So, but Celebrity will do the vaccinated, so they won't need to do test cruising when they start out there.
And how many test cruises do they have to do for each ship in
They
the
have to
line?
do at least 1 test cruise for every ship.
Every ship, okay.
And then they have to file a report and then wait to get approval from the CDC. And they expect it to happen within like a week or so after sailing. Because they expect to be sailing in early July on Freedom of the Seas.
Oh,
So
really? Okay,
they
good.
just did the test cruise. They just got back yesterday. So, yeah,
Good to hear.
yeah.
I want this cruise in October so bad.
I know. Definitely. So I did also want to talk to you guys a little bit about giving back through travel. Now we spent almost an hour. We spent an hour on getting back to travel, but what we have found is that it's important when you're traveling, even when there's not a pandemic, we interact so much with the locals and with the communities and the organizations in the localities. And that's what brings us the memories that we make on our trips. It's not just the people that you're going with, though that's a big part of it as well, but it's what you're doing when you're with your friends and family and vacationing and so we, as many of you know, all of you know, we started Toad Gives Back to give back to the people, places, and organizations that we interact with when we're traveling. And so I'm going to quickly share my screen. I've just got a couple pages that I want to share with you all. First of all, this is the Toad Gives Back website. We've got a little bit about what we're doing, who we are, and a few blogs there about what's going on. And scrolling down, we've got information about how many communities we've helped, adoptions that we've had, money that we've raised, which we do need to update that to current times right now. But up here, there's ways to give, and you can adopt trip, you can go on one of our trips, or you can click on the donate. And donate, you can send a check, you can do a Venmo, or you can give through our Facebook page, or just do a donation here. And then the other thing I wanted to share with you is our eBay site. We've got our arts and craft auction going on right now. And if you just go to ebay.com, USR/Toad Gives Back, or just search for Toad Gives Back, you'll find our page and all the items that we have listed. We've got some that are buy it now, and we've got some that are bidding, and the bidding's going through Sunday at 11 o'clock. So there's all kinds of cool things here, artwork, mouse ears, headbands. I love these fairy wands, some Lion King prints, ornaments from Janice, and flannel quilts from Tanya. And so just a lot of different things that you can get. And 100% of the proceeds are going to help Toad Gives Back and to help with our Alaska initiatives. When we get to Alaska, we're going to be staying at smaller resorts in many of the places. So helping the local economy that way. We're going to be doing tours that were booked through the local providers of the tours, and we're going to be visiting the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center, the Alaska Sea Life Center, Alaska Raptor Center, and giving back to Aware Alaska as well in Juneau. So there's a lot of things that we're doing there that we plan to do, but we can only do it with everybody's help. We can't, each one of us can't give what we want to give to these places to help them recover from their loss of tourism last year and due to the pandemic, but together we can definitely make a difference and pool together our funds and be able to get bigger and better things for them and help in more ways than just what each one of us could do individually. So hopefully you'll all consider checking out the auction, and if buying more things for your home isn't something you want to do, considering just doing a donation. I'm also thinking about doing a quick little video tomorrow just to kind of go over this part again. That's not all the travel part and more about the giving back part. And so feel free to share any of our posts on Facebook at Toad Gives Back and with your friends and family. And who knows, maybe there's a gift idea for someone's birthday or someone you know who has cold feet all the time. You can get them a nice blanket.
I recommend Tanya's.
They are beautiful, really beautiful, Tanya.
They're
They're the
It's-
perfect size because I usually, my feet get cold, but the rest of me, I have hot flashes on top and cold bottoms, and they're perfect for that. Couldn't ask for a better sized blanket. So,
And mine is slightly oversized.
yeah, I wonder why.
It needs to be
Oh,
longer
thanks.
for taller people.
Oh yeah, I'm
Yeah.
way tall, like my friend Kevin there.
And if you're a short person, the longer one is great for using as a full blanket.
Until you go reach for it and you find out you got the short one.
So that's really all that I wanted to share with everyone today. Thank you all for joining me. I'm going to stop the recording now.